Hi, everybody. I think we're ready to get started. Thank you so much for your patience. Also, thank you to the team at CRIN for hosting us today, and thank you all for taking time out of your lunch hour to be with us. How's everyone feeling? Good? Yeah? All right. We'll have a little less time today, but I appreciate the patience in getting started. It looks like we have a packed house. This looks great. It's good for carbon removal, good for Canada. Thank you for coming. My name is Naeem Merchant. I'm the executive director and co-founder of Carbon Removal Canada. And Carbon Removal Canada is a policy initiative focused on the rapid and responsible scale up of carbon removal in Canada. We're an independent nonprofit. We're not an industry association, and we focus on carbon removal policy. So that means point source carbon capture is out of scope for us. There's people working on that, and nature-based solutions are generally outside of scope for us, as there's other folks working on that. We're really focused on carbon removal or removal of CO2 from the atmosphere and storing it away for centuries or longer. And the UN IPCC is clear about this. We need carbon removal. We can't solve climate change without carbon removal. And our view at Carbon Removal Canada, when we started this organization a year or so ago, was that Canada is really well suited to be a global leader, if not the global leader in carbon dioxide removal globally. And that's for a number of reasons, right? We have the second largest landmass, the world's longest coastline, a number of natural advantages, and diverse advantages across the country. But we also have the technical expertise for doing a lot of this across a number of different industries that are relevant for carbon removal, whether it's direct air capture, enhanced weathering, biomass-based, marine-based carbon removal. So the entire portfolio of solutions, Canada is really well suited to do this. And I think the work in front of us is to develop a policy framework that enables Canada to really realize that potential. And so what does that look like? First, it starts with building or creating a strong demand signal for carbon removal. It involves developing or accelerating the supply of new technologies. And it means ensuring that we're deploying these technologies in a responsible way. And so we need to build public trust to have the license to operate all these different types of carbon removal technologies in Canada in order to be successful. And if we do all of those things, we can advance these technologies, we can drive down the cost, and we can build that public trust so that we can have a gigaton scale carbon removal industry. And actually, we did some modeling that showed if we scaled up the carbon removal sector in Canada by 2050 to the place where we need it to be, we create 89,000 jobs, and we add $100 billion a year to our GDP. So it's a huge economic opportunity. And we see that as a huge economic opportunities. And I think there's still a lot of work to be done around Article 6.4 and a lot of fine print to be figured out, but that's also starting to lay the groundwork for carbon removal being a massive export industry for Canada as well, and other countries that can do this. So we are, as you can tell, excited about the potential for carbon removal in Canada. We have a lot of things to figure out. We have to figure out how to do this in a way that is responsible. We have to work through some of the challenges. There are many of them, but we also have to find a way to capitalize on these opportunities. And I can't think of a better panel to help work through some of these questions today. So thank you all for taking the time to be here and talk about this with us. So I'll stop talking. I'll do as little talking here on out, I promise, as I go forward. And I'll just introduce the panel we have today with us. So please welcome Alberta's Minister of Environment and Protected Areas, the Honorable Rebecca Schultz, and Quebec's Minister of the Environment, the fight against climate change, wildlife and parks, Benoit Charette. Deep Sky's Vice President of Government Affairs and Public Policy, Jason Vanderheyden, and Microsoft's Director of Policy Engagement in their Environment Sustainability Policy team, David Frank. Thank you all for being here. So just to kick things off, why don't we start with you, Jason, from the Deep Sky perspective. We have seen Deep Sky announce a new project around direct air capture in Innisfail, Alberta. Can you tell us a little bit more about the vision of that innovation center and what opportunities you see for direct air capture and carbon removal in Canada based on your experience with that?
Yeah, thanks, Naeem, and thanks for the opportunity to be here today. Feel very lucky to be up here with such a great panel and have an opportunity to talk a little bit about what we're doing at Deep Sky. And Deep Sky is a bit unique in our approach for carbon removals in a global context. We're the only IP agnostic project developer for carbon removals in the direct air capture, direct ocean capture space. And so, what we've done is we're bringing together 8 of the world's leading direct air capture technologies to a single location in Innisfail, Alberta, a community about an hour north of Calgary in the heart of Alberta. And we're going to test those technologies against each other to see which ones perform in Canadian winters, which ones have a pathway to lower energy utilization and can be as efficient as possible. And we're going to scale up with the best of the best that come out of that come out of that technology assessment. And so Alberta is an ideal place for us to be doing this, given it's a pioneer in storage and storing CO2 in particular. So for us, this is a really exciting opportunity to put Canada on the map and Alberta on the map with a focus on these direct air capture technologies. And we intend to scale up very quickly after evaluating some of these technologies and just to put things in perspective, because we've seen a lot of projects globally kind of emerging and being announced, and these things take time. We signed our lease in Innisfail in June of last year, and we will be capturing and sequestering CO2 in spring of 2025. And so I think there's a real excitement and energy around this and our ability to move quickly, and really happy to see that this is happening in Canada.
And you've had some exciting news around a purchase that enables you to move quickly as well, not just from the technology deployment standpoint, but the demand creation point. Can you tell us a bit more about that recent announcement?
Yeah, so well, David's here with us today, and he can certainly talk a little bit about his perspective about why Microsoft has decided to be a partner and be one of our first buyers of our carbon removal credits. Yeah, we were excited to announce both the Royal Bank of Canada and Microsoft have purchased an offtake agreement with us over 10 years of 10,000 tons per annum. We are it's 2,000 tons per annum, but it's a smaller facility. We're only talking about 3,000 tons a year, but that's not really the purpose of the facility. Like I said, it's really about having those to be able to evaluate those technologies for us, and having these offtakes really help us, offset the costs that are associated with DAC technology right now. That's the reality that we face. It's very expensive. A lot of these companies they're in their infancy, and so these offtake agreements are crucially important to us and to the market to send a signal that there is buyers and demand for these credits. And we're really happy to see both Microsoft come to the table, but also RBC as a new entrant to the carbon removal space.
Yeah, no, that's a hell of a demand signal from two really important players in this field. Um, Minister Schultz, Alberta is pursuing the inclusion of direct air capture into its Carbon Capture and Incentive Program. Can you tell us a little bit about this program, first of all? And can you discuss why Alberta is actively choosing to support the carbon removal sector?
I think for us in Alberta, we always say that we have been leaders in energy for a number of decades, and we have, I think, a few things that play into that. One, obviously, is our geology, and from that has also grown our highly skilled technical workforce in these areas. And so it's how we've become a leader in oil and gas production, but also emissions reduction on the other side. And so we've always said we are technology agnostic, but we want to be the place where innovators choose to come to test these technologies and then, of course, to grow and thrive. And so just last year, we announced our Alberta Carbon Capture Incentive Program, and this is a program that offers up to 12% of eligible capital costs to spur on investment in carbon capture, utilization, and storage. We've seen a lot of success in that. Again, geologically, we're well positioned. The expertise for energy is very similar. We need that. We have that. And so we've already, when it comes to CCUS, we have safely and permanently stored 14 million tons of CO2 through our two main projects over the last decade. That's Alberta Carbon Trunk Line and Shell Quest. And then, of course, as a lot of folks are knocking on our doors saying, hey, we want to test other new technologies here, we've been looking at our programs to say, how do we incentivize that? We are in a position where we can do that. We have as well a tier program, and that stands for Technology Innovation and Emissions Reduction. So it is a levy on heavy emitters that we're also able to then reinvest those dollars into new technology to help de-risk that. We do that in partnership with Emissions Reduction Alberta as well. And so there are a number of ways that we try to encourage that investment in Alberta, based on our history in these areas. So for us, it's not about us choosing as a province or a government what technologies we believe are the technologies of the future, but us saying to industry, whatever you want to move forward in, we want to make sure that because of our low taxes, because of our workforce, because of our geology, because of the incentives that we have, and we're working to reduce red tape. We want to work at the speed of business so that projects can get approved and move forward. We want to be that jurisdiction of choice.
And it's a really smart approach, the technology agnostic approach, because we're so early in carbon removal and even within direct air capture, we have a lot to figure out and a lot of questions to figure out. And so being a destination for that sort of innovation across different technology types, I think is positioning Alberta really well. That's really, really exciting. I'm curious, and I just want to maybe open this up to the whole panel. What are some ideas that come to mind that we can do in addition to attract more businesses to do what Deep Sky is doing and other companies are hoping to do in Canada in terms of carbon removal in Canada? And any other ideas around this?
Well, I would like to say, first of all, thank you to company like Deep Sky for offering this kind of expertise. And thank you to companies like Microsoft to put their confidence in this expertise, because we need these first thrusters. I don't even know if it's a word in English. Thrusters, is it a word in English? Yes, no. So I invent officially this word this morning. We need people to trust these new technology, because at the end, it will be and it has to be part of the solution. I know the first goal should be lowering our emission, but at the end, even if we were only with renewable technologies, energies, we would have to remove also the result of the emissions. So we need this new addition in a basket of solutions. So thank you to both of you. And for a government, as the government is of Quebec, the role is to put in place the right regulation to make sure this technology, these opportunities are recognized. So we have a work to do in implementing the regulation. We are working well, and we put our trust in companies like Deep Sky for their first steps, but we do have a role also to play by ourselves to make sure our regulation put the solution at the center of the basket of possibilities. And what the companies need is previsibility, make sure they know they could put their trust and buy credits that are recognized also. So that's where we stand at this moment. And we do have, through our global plan, money to help companies like Deep Sky doing their first steps.
That's really critical. And I think as well, I think the point you made around the importance of obviously understanding where carbon removal fits in the big picture. The important thing here is we're reducing emissions, but that we see removal playing an important and additional role alongside emissions reductions. And that when we can establish regulations that make it more credible to buy direct air capture credits, that can go a really long way to incorporating direct air capture in compliance markets and be able to trade these credits internationally. So there's a lot of good ideas here. I wanted to shift over to I think the biggest problem that I hear about when I talk to companies working in carbon removal is that we need to figure out the demand equation. Because I think the technical ability is there to scale up these technologies, but we need a more kind of we need more demand in this space. And so far, we've seen a ton of leadership from Microsoft in this. I think Microsoft is probably the biggest, if not the biggest, buyer of carbon removal globally, and has played a huge role in shaping the carbon removal market to date. And that demand has been critical to get us to where we are now. How do we get more Microsofts? Where do we find more buyers like Microsoft to get involved in this market? RBC joining is a really big deal here, but we need that to happen at an even faster rate.
It's a good question. And firstly, to the minister's both, thank you for both your leadership in this space. And Microsoft's a business or a company that's been proudly in Canada for close on 4 decades. To your question about how do you encourage others? I think we view our role as partnership is key. And if we are publicly partnering like Deep Sky and supporting innovation, and that's what we say liked about that sort of project, sort of trying different technologies, we think that will hope. Thank you. That will hopefully give more confidence to others to sort of come in and see that these are high quality carbon removal projects that really help. For us, we've got big commitments we made back in 2020 about removing carbon, all our historic carbon from the atmosphere. Carbon removal is a key part of that. And across a whole range of different technologies. And we hope that by doing that and the investments and partnerships we're making, that shows the strength of these projects and will help encourage others to enter the market.
I think that makes a lot of sense. We're going to need to see more companies join, and I think the strategic investment in Deep Sky in that way across a different set of technologies, I think can make a really big difference. Minister Charette, you mentioned kind of the importance of reducing emissions and that carbon removal has a role to play. Can you expand on how Quebec sees carbon removal playing a role to reaching Quebec's climate targets?
We do have an ambitious plan to reduce our emission. At the same time, the removal technologies are quite new. So we like the perspective of Deep Sky analyzing all the possibilities because they are numerous, but we don't know which one is the more efficient. So we have to challenge each technology to see which one is the best at the lower cost possible, because these technologies are quite expensive at this moment. And it's not the role for the Quebec government to do this job. It's not our expertise. It's not our job. So we put our trust in companies like, again, Deep Sky to make that work done. And at the end, we will be able to choose the more efficient technologies. It's still at the early stages around the world, but we know the potential will grow quite significantly over the coming years. So if we consider our plan at this moment, it's a small amount of our reduction that are calculated through removal at this moment, but we know that it will grow quite significantly over the next years.
Yeah, and I mean that recognition, even if it's a small one, for removals to start off with, is a really important signal for carbon removal, because we know that carbon removal, the main benefit that we're going to see from carbon removal is really the back half of this century, but it's not something that we can just switch on, right? We need companies like Deep Sky to be innovating and building and other carbon removal methods as well. And I think, the folks on this panel, in terms of their investments from a policy point of view, their strategic purchases early on via Microsoft, and the innovation that's happening at Deep Sky and your approach to that, I think we're going to look back at this time and think these were really catalytic decisions in terms of each of these panelists making strategic investments in this space, because we are at the very, very beginning of the carbon removal sector. I personally think it's going to be one of the biggest undertakings of humanity to remove billions of tons of CO2 from the atmosphere, but we have to start somewhere. And I think that approach of we'll start small and we'll build on this at this stage right now, and we'll make targeted and strategic bets, I think is the right way forward. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that. I think what's so remarkable about the panel that we have assembled here today is you have two ministers of the environment from, completely different parts of Canada who have taken really big bets on carbon removals. We have, you know, Minister Charette and the Quebec government have, and this is not a secret at all, they've made an equity investment in our company very early on of $25 million. And then you have Minister Schultz and the government of Alberta with their ASIP program that's going to be benefiting all, you know, direct air capture and carbon removal companies in their provinces. And I think it's a real testament to the leadership that Canadian policy leaders are taking in this space and really putting Canada on the map. And it's making it easier, quite frankly, for companies like Deep Sky to make those leaps of faith and make those bets ourselves. And you look to the south, you know, look to the south of the border and some of the uncertainty maybe that's emerging right now with a new administration. Like this is a real opportunity, I think, for our policymakers to make the case for Canada, like it does on many other issues like critical minerals and other sorts of economic opportunities. So I just want to make sure that we understand that like this is actually pretty unique sort of time for us, and we have multiple provinces doing different things to really encourage this industry.
Yeah, and in addition to that, I think the leadership we're seeing for provinces being backed up by the work being done by the federal government, whether that's kind of developing a direct air capture offset protocol that's going to be usable in compliance markets and other markets in Canada. We have the government launching a procurement program. So the federal government is going to be one of the first governments in the world to directly buy carbon removal services from Canadian companies to help reduce the emissions intensity of our national security fleet, for example. And the you know wonderful incentive in Alberta, you know, tops up the 60% investment tax credit at the federal level as well for deployment of direct air capture and other technologies. So, you know, we add all these things together, Canada becomes a really, really exciting place to do business in terms of carbon removal. But before we get too excited about that, we still have to figure out the demand question, right? What other ideas come to mind in terms of expanding demand for carbon removal? I'm thinking about compliance markets. I know both Alberta and Quebec have you know led in carbon pricing in different ways. Can you tell us maybe a bit more about the role that direct air capture and carbon removal can play in compliance markets as adding to that potential demand signal long term?
In fact, I think companies will want it only for a market, not only, but for a marketing reason also. They will want to show the result of their efforts. So it could be profitable. You were talking about economy. Our plan is a plan of green economy. So for us, it's a way to develop our economy and for a company to be able to say, I reduce my emissions by X percentage or X ton, it's a marketing that can be profitable for the company also. So it's good for the environment. It's good for the global economy, but it's good for the marketing of the company. So you say, how can we increase the demand? Is by showing that there are concrete results also for these companies to say by 2030, we will be at this level. By 2050, we will be at other levels. So it's good. And I think it will help increasing the demand through the next years.
And I'm also seeing, and I'm looking to you, Minister Schultz, an open public consultation right now on the inclusion of direct air capture and potentially in the TIER program. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that could potentially look like?
Yeah, I mean, for us, and I like what the minister just said about a lot of these decisions being decided by industry and the markets. And I think not as government saying, you know, this will be the technology we use, this will be the next steps we're going to take. And I think having it be driven by markets and industry is always key for a province like Alberta. And I think that's what this engagement is all about. We need to make sure that we're talking to industry, finding if there are gaps within our policy or regulatory structures, how we might be able to better drive some of that innovation. But I also think it kind of does come back to what you said about some of the challenges. And I mean, the economics is still a challenge. That is where our system, our tier system, both in terms terms of the offsets and credits, we have a benefit in Alberta, I think, to spur on some of these investments and trying different things. The work that we do, the funding calls that we do through Emissions Reduction Alberta to help de-risk some of that early stage innovation, I think, is pretty key. But that's still a major concern, I think, and maybe a barrier moving forward. But I think for us, it's all about making sure that we're being open, transparent, working with industry, listening to community concerns, and then deciding how we might be able to move forward. So I think what you're seeing in that is an openness and a willingness from our government to hear, like I said, technology agnostic. But this is an area where a lot of people are banging down our doors right now. I've had a number of meetings even over the last couple of days on companies that are looking to continue to test in addition to Deep Sky, but there are a number that are looking to come to Alberta. Again, I think it just speaks to the nature of our province, but what you're seeing in the consultation is an openness and a willingness from our government to say, hey, we can look at new and different things.
That's great. And we appreciate that openness, and we'll be responding with some of our ideas. David, how do you typically engage governments in sharing what you've learned in supporting the carbon removal industry, so that some of the lessons from Microsoft can be adapted and incorporated into how governments think about how to support such a new industry?
Sure. Sorry. If I take a step back though for a moment and try and answer your previous question first, I think the sort of another signal is some of the global reporting regimes that are starting to develop. So obviously in the European Union, I'm based in the UK, so not in the EU, but close. You've got the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive and the obligations that's going to put on companies to report against a whole range of data points, including their environmental impact. That makes businesses think about how not only do they have to report, but what changes might they need to make to sort of show progress over time, which could push them to think about direct air capture. Doesn't have to be within the EU, so that could make sort of businesses and innovation in Canada really attractive. In answering your question around how do we engage with government, I think we like to be a good partner, and so as much as we show what we can do, we want to understand the sort of challenges that governments are facing and how they're trying to address them. So we look to show up with partners to show the innovation that we're helping to sort of bring to the market, and also explain how we're thinking about using it for ourselves. So in a sort of context in Alberta or Quebec, I think it would be our local colleagues showing up, hopefully well, I'm sure they will be being constructive, showing like how the partnership with Deep Sky and others helps deliver on local policy objectives, and showing how regulation can play a sort of really positive role in that signal from government intent. But I really like how you phrase it, like not being agnostic on technology, because we're agnostic. We're investing in a whole range of solutions, both on the engineered side and on the nature-based side, because we recognize we don't have the luxury of waiting. So I think you made it point very well earlier, like this is something that we'll really start seeing the benefits in decades to come, but we don't have the luxury of time to wait. So I think that's how we try to engage and show up in a positive way.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And I think combining all of these expertise and experiences, I think will be really valuable in helping shape the carbon removal sector in Canada. Industry, current buyers, governments, organizations, and other groups, including communities and First Nations. And I wanted to ask, what can we learn from kind of engagement with First Nations in helping deploy technologies like carbon removal? All roads to net zero go through Indigenous lands, and so how can we take some of the lessons that we've learned, the things we've done well and not well, to ensure that we are turning the page on how we develop clean energy projects in Canada? And I'll leave this open to anyone who has some thoughts on this.
Well, I'm happy to jump in. I think in Alberta, one of the things that we're very proud about that we've launched in the last couple of years is the Alberta Indigenous Opportunities Corporation, which allows Indigenous communities to have an equity stake in a number of different projects in a variety of different areas. We've just recently expanded it, so tourism projects can also be included. But typically, what this was really developed on was really thinking about energy. And so whether that's traditional transitional energy, new forms of energy. It's pretty exciting, and I think it's important for a couple of reasons. One, for Indigenous communities to have an equity stake in projects, I think is good. Obviously, economics, so that their residents and their people are bringing those benefits of the resources that belong to the province of Alberta to support their communities. And on the flip side, it's also, I think, really important to have those voices at the beginning, at the table, at the very beginning of projects while these projects are being developed, so that we can hear what community concerns are. And then industry is really stepping up to then say, how do we address those concerns way at the beginning instead of months or years down the road? And so we've seen a lot of success and there's a lot of excitement around it. And I think, same for community consultation, as you mentioned. I know that companies are doing a lot of that work, and I'll leave that to you to talk about the specific work that you're doing in communities. I think, we do have, I think, in Alberta, a very unique understanding of energy and technology. And so, even on things like, carbon capture, utilization, and storage, which is obviously linked to some of the projects that we're talking about today, it's almost something that was taken for granted. Yes, we understand that's happening. It's happening right in our backyard. I was having a conversation with somebody the other night, and they said, how does this work? Show me a photo. And I was showing her a photo, and she said, so the farmer literally just farms their crop around this tiny piece of equipment. It helps for people to understand, what does this look like? How does it work? What happens, once this is built? What impact might it have in our backyard? And I do think there is, forgive me, because this might be a bold statement, but there is some concern, whether that be around direct air capture or CCUS, there has been a move from the NGO community to create some fear and uncertainty amongst communities, because I think the goal is to move away from fossil fuels. And so I know I've been talking to state legislators in the United States, and they're seeing that as well. And so I do think it's important, as we move forward on technology, that companies are out there engaging with communities, talking about what this is going to look like, and making sure that there's a very real understanding of the process and the science and the safety components as well.
Yeah, a very open conversation about the benefits as well as the risks, but one that is honest and transparent and not kind of fueled ideologically, but very clear-eyed and pragmatic about what needs to happen. Any other thoughts on this?
Just from a project developer perspective, this is really instrumental to the success or failure of any project. Like, it's fairly straightforward for us in terms of how serious we take our obligation to partner with First Nations and Indigenous communities. And we've been putting a lot of thought to that and how we build our own muscle on this. As someone who's new, no one's really done projects in direct air capture at scale yet. So we're learning as we go. We love programs like the AIOC. We've already begun partnering with First Nations and Indigenous communities in our early project work in Quebec as well. And so far, the one thing I think that has been encouraging is there's a lot of enthusiasm for what we're doing by First Nations and Indigenous communities. So I think if there's any key learnings that I could offer as a project developer right now, is it's positive, the feedback we've been getting, but I agree with the comments made about the importance of early engagement as being probably the most important piece to all of this.
And if I add to that, as a partner to a project developer, equally important to us. Our corporate mission is to empower every person and organization on the planet. And so absolutely ensuring Indigenous communities, local communities are part of those conversations early, understand the benefits, and they also facing the impact of climate change. And so this is technology to address that. They are on the front line, just as we all are, in sort of the sort of negative impacts of extreme heat, flooding, damage to agricultural crops, be what it may. And so we think that's equally important. And so slight sort of connected to that is also why we're very keen in our conversations around the sort of Article 6 piece of negotiations are taking place in another room here to sort of see how those are developed, so that sort of business to business type transactions around carbon credits can still be facilitated and use technology such as direct air capture.
Yeah. really helpful point here. How do we, I'm thinking a lot about the productivity challenges that we're facing across Canada. And I think one way to address some of that is the development of intellectual property in Canada. And I was wondering, how Quebec, as, a leader in clean energy and climate action, Alberta as a leader in kind of geologic storage and energy, how do we encourage IP development and carbon removal from a public policy standpoint, working with industry, but to continue to build that IP, those IP assets here in Canada or in Canada?
Simple example, I think a meeting like the one we are gathered today is a good way to talk about these opportunities. COPs. I've been involved in COPs for a few years now, and what is interesting is to see the first COP I participated in. It was the mandatory need to lower our emission. That was the first COP. And after that, we see through the COPs the opportunities. We have a lot of people here that are participating in COPs because they see opportunities for their expertise, they see opportunities of partnership. So COPs are interesting for many reasons, but to talk about these opportunities. So the evolution of the COPs through the years, let us talk about these kind of solutions today.
Okay, so climate innovation, folks, talk to Minister Charette while you're here. Is that right? Yeah.
In French, it will be easier, but in English, it's also a possibility.
Anything to add?
I just think for us, again, it comes down to having the right policy and regulatory frameworks and then having the ability to help de-risk some of that early stage innovation. And when we look at our tier system, technology innovation and emissions reduction, I'm not a fan of acronyms because everybody leaves and says, I don't know what the heck she was talking about. But we've been able to reinvest over $1.5 billion into a number of emissions reduction projects, which is pretty exciting. And so I also would just say our Carbon Conversion Technology Center helps companies test and scale their innovations. And I think that speaks to partnerships as well. So whether that be with industry, our post-secondary institutions, I mean, we had the University of Calgary here this week, and just talking about the number of partnerships that we've had with them on everything from our methane emissions reduction, CCUS, you name it. I think that's where some of this lies, is bringing together post-secondary, academia, the regulators and industry to say, how do we do things a little bit differently and better and reduce some of the barriers? And that's the case in all technologies as well.
Yeah, there's been a lot of great energy research coming out of University of Calgary, and as an Edmontonian, that's sometimes hard for me to admit, but it's true. Okay, last question. I think, just tying all of this up, I often get asked, and I've been working in carbon removal for a number of years, and for some of that outside of Canada, and people kind of ask me, like, who's the global leader in carbon removal, right? And it's kind of hard to answer that question, right? I think about the United States. We're seeing a lot of policy support for carbon removal. I think they're kind of really doing a lot there. I went to see the direct air capture facility in Iceland in May, and it was tremendous. And I love Iceland. I think it's a beautiful country. I've been there multiple times. I think we can do better than Iceland in Canada in terms of the scale of direct air capture and what's possible. And I'm curious, I feel like when I look at the different carbon removal technologies and methods that are out there, we're doing direct air capture in Squamish with carbon engineering and Deep Sky now in Alberta. We're doing marine alkalinity enhancement and river alkalinity enhancement in Nova Scotia. We've got companies figuring out how to leverage the mining sector to reduce the footprint of that through carbon removal, and agriculture, enhanced weathering. I mean, across the board, we're doing so much to advance carbon removal from an innovation standpoint. So from an innovation standpoint, my view is, I'm obviously very biased, but I think Canada is a leader in global leader right now in carbon removal. How do we hold on to that lead? How do we not let this slip away? So this is an open question for everybody.
I'll start. So I think at least for part of this is, how do we tell the world what Canada has to offer in this space? And so I think it begins with conversations like this. we strongly believe in our thesis that Canada can be the global leader in carbon removals. We have the ingredients that you can't manufacture, right? We have geologic storage, we have a huge landmass, the ability to, build, limitless renewable energy if we choose to. And, those are the ingredients, quite frankly, to drive a successful carbon removal sector. And so I think if we take a concerted effort, with through the leadership of like we have on the stage here today to tell that story, we'll see an investment by companies like Deep Sky. We hope to see more Deep Skies doing this type of work in Canada, and we hope that there's lots of fast followers that see the opportunity the same way that we do, because we think we all benefit from it. So yeah, I think just telling our story and what the opportunity is in Canada, we don't really have that concerted, voice that puts the flag in the ground for our country yet on this. And I think we could and we should.
Anything else for folks to add on that?
I think we still face some risks, and I know that we've heard this from a number of folks in this space in Alberta, that there is a lot of policy, and maybe it's a misalignment between some of the provincial goals and some of the federal goals, and that's a bit of a challenge. And so we've been trying to work with the federal government. I think when you see that our ASIP program was really driven to work with federal investment tax credits, our premier often says, well, there are many things we might disagree on. Some of these programs are things that we do agree on with our federal government, and have worked to try to make sure that there is some alignment there. Because again, I think what we've been able to show in Alberta is that instead of taking a punitive policy approach by saying, look, we're going to put in caps and maximums and then regulatory barriers, it scares away investment. And so we've tried to take the opposite approach in Alberta to say, look, you know what, we're going to move as far and as fast as technology and economics allow. We are going to work with industry. We are going to figure out how we can be the best place for industry to call Alberta home, to see it as a test bed of innovation. I think, what we've heard from Deep Sky, I think the same thing when we look at something like geothermal, for example. We had a geothermal testing facility. We're working on our drilling accelerator. We want to see that innovation coming out of Alberta. It's now being deployed in other other countries around the world. That's what we want to see in all of these different areas. And so I think it's maybe a move away from hard targets and more punitive policies to working together with industry to say, okay, how do we work to see more of this? And I think it's interesting to see, that we have different provinces with different approaches that work for our populations, our location within the country, and so I think that maybe is the key to future success.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and that healthy kind of friendly competition as well doesn't hurt either. But there's plenty of carbon removal work to go around for everybody, so that is really helpful. Just as we tie things up here, I just wanted to reflect for a moment that we're here talking with two ministers of environment, a major carbon removal purchaser and an innovator about permanent carbon removal, and at a leading environmental conference. And I don't know that would have been possible like 5 or 6 years ago. So I just want to acknowledge that we've come a really, really long way, and a full crowd here to talk about the potential for carbon removal, permanent carbon removal in Canada. And I think the key is, how do we continue to build on this and leverage the unique kind of assets that each of our jurisdictions across Canada really, really has. But I think there's a few kind of key themes that came out of this. I think the need to for government and industry to work together to find solutions that can enable carbon removal to succeed, that we find new and innovative ways to kind of create more demand for carbon removal going forward, and that we find opportunities to develop that IP in Canada, across Canada, and that we can potentially export around the world to make this a truly global industry that Canada leads on. And I think that striving for leadership is going to be really important here. I think Canada has a lot to offer in terms of helping the world get to gigaton scale carbon removal, and so we need to take that leadership role, I think, really seriously. So I just wanted to share that final thought and just thank our panelists today for their time, and to thank the CRIN team for hosting us. Can we give everyone here a round of applause? Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.